I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you could all stand. Good morning, Miss Amy.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I need to make this bigger for Amy. All I see is these little squints looking, trying to read that.
You want to see the property owner survey first, okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I did email this out, but I do have hard copies. Does anybody want a hard copy?
I'll have a hard copy. Sure.
Here, I can help pass it on.
I've seen it and read it, but I didn't read it.
This is the Lake Shawana resident survey.
Thanks. Thank you very kindly.
Okay, so this is draft number 2 of the survey. We had, at a prior planning session, I had brought the first draft and had gotten some good feedback from you as far as what you were looking for, what you wanted to know. And so we've modified the letter, the cover letter, and then also the survey to reflect, hopefully reflect what it is that you were looking for with that. So I emailed that out last week to give you an opportunity to look at it. I did get one comment from Commissioner Wincher as far as for listing in the phases of the project, including that we do need to amend the water plan. And, so that will certainly be added. But otherwise, I'm just here to hear your feedback and whether or not there's anything else you want to see on this letter or the survey.
I liked your letter.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I thought you did a very well job on the letter. Do we need to have question number 1? Everybody? Or just, is it?
You're talking about the question 1 itself?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess are you confident that the vast majority of people are concerned about the water level? I guess that was the first blush at just trying to get from your perspective. I certainly think there's many people that are, have been very vocal about that, but I guess kind of gauging how many people believe that to be the case. So I don't think I guess the question back would be, does it hurt to have that question be there to just gauge of how many people are really concerned about this and feel that it's a problem?
So we tried to pare this down to really those really basic questions like, do you think the water's too high? Do you think something should be done about it? Are you willing to pay for it? And do you want the lid to be administering this program?
I like them.
Those are really the core questions that I heard at our planning session. And so what we would do is I know this is important to you to hear this information prior to the August budget approval. And so we would, if I have your blessing for this with any minor tweaks, we would go ahead and get this out. So then we can have those responses back to you.
Amy, Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't know what, I'm just putting this out there for discussion.
Okay.
The lid, I think they put out the comment that would be like around 8,000 per household. Am I correct on that? I don't want to.
What I stuck to was the published document that they have available to the public. So I pulled all of the figures from the engineering report because that is really, I guess, what we're considering the official numbers at this point. And so that's why I cited that as far as, really citing our source as far as where are we getting that number from.
But didn't they put in there an estimate on per household? I know that the 2.3 and the... They had a big
chart in there, the distribution, and there was a lot of variances to that depending on what you had. And so we were trying to simplify it as much as possible to give people, number one, the understanding that would be responsible for paying part of it, and they would be responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the pumps and all of that, without drilling down too specific, because it's changed quite a bit, and it probably will change. And so we really wanted to just give people that general idea of, this is about how much money we're talking about.
Right, but where I'm going with this is that if I'm a lake owner, that I thought it was like 8,000 per, they could pay it off at one time. And to me, if a guy, again, just putting this for discussion, I look at 2.3 million and 200, well, how much is it going to cost me? Is it going to cost me 200 a year? You know, if we should put in that, you know, roughly the $8,000 per landowner, I don't know, because.
Mr. Chair, if I could, this is the first, this is an initial step in this process that's quite lengthy. There will be the 429 process. If this advances, if it's approved with permitting, if it's all of that advances farther down the line, there are other public hearings that will be held regarding the specific 429 issue and that assessment process and all of that. So there will be more opportunity to dive into once they know for sure what those assessments are going to be and be able to provide comment at that point in time when that is. Now would be a guess, and even next week they're coming and requested to be on the planning session agenda to talk about the assessment distribution. And so they have ideas on how that's going to change or how they would like to see that change. So I'm a little hesitant to put what a final project would look like on a per parcel basis, because there are a lot of variables up here now, and they will have an opportunity to weigh in on that. Makes sense?
Or would you like another question on the survey to find out if you're
questions,
wondering how much someone's willing to...
6 is already getting up to.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job on this. The only question I have on finances, if we did this, you have to go out for a bond, am I correct? I'm trying to think of how does the 285,000 play into the 2.3? Don't you have to go out for a bond for 2.3? And then you start spending out of that as you go, because you don't run different bonds at different levels of a project.
What right now, that 2019 budget that's being, I think, proposed isn't going to be part of that full bond. That's going to be an annual assessment that's done in 2019 that would be assessed to those property owners to pay for that initial phase, because they're not ready yet to go out to the 429 process, because they don't have the permission to do it. They don't have all of that. So that's how I have looked at this as being your first step is to get that more in-depth study, and I can't remember some of the engineering work done to be able to answer some of the questions that folks have about whether or not this can be permitted, whether or not it is possible to complete fully, and then that would be part of that process.
So if we agreed to their plan of $285,000, then that money would come out of our money?
No, the money would be assessed to those lid owners.
Who pays it up front? Somebody.
They would have it available when they have, they'd have it available in 2019. You as a board could consider whether or not you would want to advance it ahead of time, but it would be already on the tax rolls and approved to be on those tax rolls for that. So, yeah, I was misunderstanding. Good question. It's available. Half of it is available at the first settlement in 2019, or would be if all of this would be approved. Again, I'm making those assumptions.
Yep.
You can consider, based upon their request, if they would make it, to advance it ahead of time. I mean, I wouldn't.
Well, I think some of their question was too that the 285 is for the whole project engineering. So there's like 23,000 for this. So it would come up steps where you're right. You could wait till the tax money's already there to be able to pay for that.
That's what we requested on that May 22nd meeting. That's what I'm hoping they're bringing tomorrow, is more of a timeline about what those steps would be that would get to the point of answering some of these questions that many of these agencies and whatnot have regarding the specifics of the project.
And we do have that listed here, and if you look in the kind of the next phases, the first one is determine the 2019 budget, and then it's the 2019 assessment, and we say about 285,000. So we give the property owners the understanding that in 2019, this 285,000 has the potential to go on the tax rolls. And then farther down, then it's construct the project, and that's that 2.3.
Correct, but you'll have to go out for bonds for that if that passed.
And that has an entire process in and of itself, where they
That's
do
right.
public hearings, and that's when those specific assessment questions would be answered about how they would look at that. That's my understanding on how that works. I've never done it, so.
So when we talk about that going out for bonds, the county goes out for bonds, the lid goes out for bonds, the lake goes out for bonds. Who goes out for bonds?
The lid with the authority of the board.
The county would be the bond issuing authority.
I don't exactly know what that means.
The county would go out for bonds.
And then we tax the people
Yep.
to pay it back.
Yep.
So the county goes out for the bond. There's an expense for that.
All of that's paid with that bond issue and then assessed back to those lid
Okay.
members.
Okay. Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, Amy, this is just going out to the Lake Shamana property owners, correct?
Correct. Part of 400 or so people.
We had talked about other interested property owners, and that isn't something that can't happen in the future. If there is, as the progression of this project happens, things of that nature, maybe that's something you want to look at expanding.
And I
if I-
think in our discussion at the planning session, really what you wanted to get a feel for, because you know what's going to be in front of you, is that $285,000 2019 budget, was really to take the pulse of the people from the Lake Shamana to find out,
Yep.
is there a willingness to move this project forward at least through that phase? And that's why we wanted to get this survey out, so you, because that's still engineering work. That's still planning and process and all of that. And that really only affects the Lake Shamana residents from a financial standpoint. When you get to the next point where the actual permitting of this and we go through, that's when, we have maybe some other stakeholders.
Yeah.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, this is off the wall here, but if we could notify the lid from Lake Shamana, again, it's been brought, and Deb, I know she's brought up many times, they had phases of this $285,000. I'd like to know again what these phases are.
Are you wanting that outlined in this letter?
No,
or
no,
do
no,
you
just,
just?
that's why I said it was off the wall,
Okay.
for if they're gonna be here next Tuesday, I'd sure like to have an answer to that.
Sure.
And I spoke with Bob Cohen. He requested to come to the planning session next week, and they did, I did reiterate that. Good, an update in terms of what that 2019 budget will look like and how that's going to be spent was yet again identified.
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of sending
Yep,
this
so
letter
am I.
out as presented to us.
I just got one minor change,
Okay.
if that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
You got them in front of you? Mm-hmm. Okay. On question 4, you say, are you willing to pay a share of an estimate, current estimate, $285,000? If you could do the same thing with number 5, are you willing to pay a share of an estimate, current estimate, 2.3? Mm-hmm. So they look the same?
So, are you
Or
willing
just reorder that a
Yeah.
little bit? Okay.
Get current estimate and put it up after assessment, like you do on question 4.
Understood.
Could
Yep.
we make that into one question? Add 4 and 5 together. Say, are you current, and then additional 2.3 at a later, just throwing that
The
out.
reason why I separated it is because you really wanted to focus in on what the willingness was to spend that 285 separate from the project. And so that's why we pulled that out separately.
I'm good for it.
Okay, yes, I can certainly reorder
I
that.
didn't make a motion. I
Read
just-
better.
Yep, nope.
Thank you for this.
Yep.
You did a good job.
So do we need a motion?
No, I didn't mean that as a motion. We can move on with things that I'm okay with if anybody else objects or whatever.
And it's expected that we're going to get on this right away, get this?
Yes, my thought is we would probably get this out in the mail tomorrow. That way then, we would be giving them a window of time to get that back. Right now, we have the request to have it back by July 27th. So that would be, a fairly tight time frame, but it would certainly be before any any consideration you'd be giving to a 2019 budget in August.
Thanks, Dina.
Further questions from the board?
I do have one other question. Is there, for clarification, for the emails that I'm receiving, it sounds like they want me to turn a switch on tomorrow to stop their water. And the gist of this program is we're probably looking at a 2 to 3 year before things can really happen on this whole process. Am I correct?
I don't think anybody really knows and can say for sure, but there are numerous steps that need to be taken and numerous agencies that need to be consulted in terms of figuring that out and how long it's going to take. I had spoken with, or just communicated with Amy and Helen and Mark yesterday and just kind of said, give me, how many, we've talked about permitting from different agencies, but which agencies really need permitting? And it was explained to me that it depends upon what information is learned. Right now, there are still too many questions to be able to say you need exactly this, you need exactly that, you need exactly that. And so this next step of engineering really is meant to answer some of those questions, which will then kind of translate into the timing that it'll take to get it all resolved.
Well, but my question is, in 2019, they can come before us for 2019, if we're looking at this 285, for instance, if we would approve that, then they can't come back till 2020 to do anything else. So, I mean, we are looking at about a 3-year window here, I would think. Or am I wrong on that?
I don't know how it could work differently, but
Okay.
again, we're all kind of entering this. This is a very
Okay.
new for
But
everybody.
I just want these people to understand that this problem is not going to be fixed in the next 6 weeks,
Yeah,
because that's just the rules we have to work under.
yeah.
Further questions? Commissioner Blaine, you've got that look on your face. It's a
That's
scary one, I know.
Yep, I know, that's probably scary. Mr. Chair, with the communication that I've had with property owners on the lake, and I'm sure everyone else on this board has had the same, but the discussion of the immediacy of doing something with this issue. My biggest concern, I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to next Tuesday. And I'm going to ask that the lid has the same level of communication with their members that they do with us on this issue. I'm tired of hearing that somehow the county and/or this board is stopping the progress of anything happening with the issue of the water level on Lake Chaminade. The latest thrown at me was why the county has not asked the governor in the state of Minnesota to consider a state of emergency for Lake Chaminade when this just happened in Marshall, because they have flooding. So we're going to hear things from a lot of different perspectives on this, and I certainly hope that the residents of Lake Chaminade, and actually there's only a few or a handful of permanent residents on the lake, and it's mostly cabin owners, and they admit that, but that understand the timelines of this, that we don't have a switch, Commissioner Wilson, that we can turn on and change the water level on Lake Chaminade, nor that can I make it stop raining up there and make the water level rise either. This will be an ongoing issue for this board and for the county until either it quits raining forever and or they can jump through the proverbial hoops that it takes to address this situation. So I'm looking forward to our dialogue next Tuesday.
Hey, Mr. Chair, if I could just comment one
Yes.
more time, just so everybody's on the same page. I did get communication back from Todd County regarding their discussion that they had. They did talk again about whether or not there was a way to offer some type of communication. I know that the LID is looking for a resolution of support based upon a request by this board. But they aren't willing to do that right now. There are just too many questions that are unanswered in terms of specifics about the actual flow, the water amount that's going to be coming, where it's going to go. There's a lot of questions with the ditch authority yet in terms of how that would work. So they are still waiting for more information, which would need to come from, I think, another level of study is how I understand it. Again, I'm learning this, and none of us have dealt with this specific situation before. And so they will continue to sit tight and not be able to offer a yes, we're supporting this project, or no, we're not supporting this project until they learn more, which makes sense.
Mr. Chair, is there a need for this board or for Morrison County to facilitate a meeting of all interested parties on this issue to help the LID? To expedite the process. In reference to your comments, Ms. Gruber, the communication recently to me was that it's taking too long to find answers to all these questions. And the thought was that if we brought everybody that has a stake in this issue all together and sit down in a room together, could we expedite this process? You can't do research over a cup of coffee.
No. And I think, Mr. Chair, that was what the result of that last meeting in the 22nd was. All those agencies were together, but there's still information that the engineering firm needs to do in terms of study, and more specific study on how they would proceed with this for those questions to be answered. I don't know if Amy has a different thought.
Yeah, I think with the feasibility study that was done, they can answer what they've already told us. If we want any more information, they're going to need to go into that next phase where they've done the feasibility study, they've zeroed in on the project that appears to be the most feasible and doable, and then they drill down into that particular project and really the details that really everybody is asking for. And I think we've heard time and time again from the engineer that they haven't done the work yet, and they need to be paid for that work. And so that's where this next phase goes into drilling down into that particular project.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, to answer Commissioner Blaine's question, we met, 3-4 months ago,
yes.
at least, with the DNR, Bowser, Soil and Water. You were there, I was there. I mean, so that question was brought up, and they were kind of blindsided us because they gave us the feasibility study, and when we got there, they had changed it already. We didn't even know about that. So, but yes, we did meet and show us what phases. And again, they keep pushing that they need this $285,000 to give people the answers, and,
Right.
And where the DNR can't do anything without the proper permitting application. So yes, we did meet with all the other.
And so I think, Commissioner Blaine, we've had many meetings, and I think we're at the point where there isn't really any more information to be had at this point. I don't think there's any other questions the engineer can answer at this point, because they need to go into that next phase in order to answer those questions that the DNR needs to know the answer to, and Todd County and all of that. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I've sat in on these meetings, and maybe it's just not possible in government to do that. But I was thinking more that if there's a showstopper, we're talking about draining infested lakes into non-infested lakes. And if there's something out there that says, guys, this is not going to happen because this just will not be allowed, that's what I'm looking for, that somebody would tell me that there's something that can't happen. If they're not saying nothing, I don't feel like the the permitting process would change that if there's something that's there that absolutely will not. And I know people don't want to answer that question, but I'd hate to see it later after we spend $200,000-$300,000 in something that we've talked about here. No, that's not possible.
And it seems that nobody wants to
No,
answer
they
that
don't.
question.
Yeah.
That is the question that
Yeah.
we've asked, and we'd like to have an answer. And in particularly, we speak of the DNR very openly. Well, why can't the DNR give us an answer? I, of course, don't have that answer either. But if the DNR, as an example, was to stand up and say, no, end of discussion.
Mr. Chair, I believe the DNR has articulated really as far as their overall, they've issued when they reviewed everything, they issued a letter, to the LID, outlining what their thoughts and opinions and support level was for this. And the area hydrologist has also articulated, needing to drill down a little bit more into the actual amount of water and the rate of flow, and then also the water plan issue. That has all been articulated.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I bring up the quality. This has really to change the water plan or to have the DNR even get involved. What they're asking for is it has nothing to do with the water quality. And that's a main thing with the LID, because LID was brought to by Lake Chaminade for lake improvement. And this has, what they're doing, I'm talking about draining or lowering the lake, has nothing to do with any water plan that we have.
Well, let's send out this letter so we can keep moving on with things. Because
I will ask one more time, though, further discussion from this board. And hearing none, I agree.
Okay.
Let's get it sent out.
Sounds good. All right, then I have a interim use permit request that was heard by the Planning Commission at their last meeting. This was recommended for approval. This is for Harley and Ruth Miller and Freeman Miller. This is an after-the-fact interim use permit to operate a wood products manufacturer, specifically a sawmill, and a home extended business, specifically a welding shop, on the property. This was recommended with 4 conditions for the IUP, and the conditions are: the IUP for the wood products manufacturer and extended home business shall be valid until Harley and Ruth Miller no longer own the property. Ingress and egress shall occur off 253rd Street. The applicant shall apply to Platte Township for the conversion of the existing residential entrance to a commercial entrance, and no parking of vehicles or equipment shall occur within the road right-of-way of 253rd or 275th Avenue.
Look for a motion.
I'll make
no, Mike's got it. I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion. Further discussion.
They had a lot of neighbors come by and support them. And they seem to be working with the township to get that road project taken care of.
I believe so.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
A question in this in this situation. So the IUP allows for a business to be located in a residential zone. Is that correct?
In an ag zone.
In an agricultural zone, so in a zone different than a business located in a non-business zone, correct? Agricultural.
I think the
I'm
question
sorry,
is, not all businesses can come in under an IUP in agriculture.
Correct. So this is, we have a use chart for every zoning district, and these are uses that were identified as allowable under an IUP in the ag zoning district.
So if a business is located, if a business wants to locate in an area that is not commercial or not a business, not zoned business, then they would be required to get an IUP or a CUP?
So what we would look at is what they're proposing to do and whether or not that use is allowable and under any sort of permitting. If it is, then more than likely it would be allowed under a conditional use permit or an interim use permit. There are some uses, though, that would not be allowed in the ag zoning district.
Is there a, can you give me an example of a business that would not need a CUP or an IUP to be located in an area zoned non-business?
Usually home-based businesses, so if you office out of your home, those are not required to get a conditional use permit or an interim use permit. Daycares are not required to get that. I'm trying to think.
Did you ask what wouldn't be allowed? An example of a
What
business
would?
that could not, or what would?
No, what I was asking for an example of a business that would locate in an area that's not zoned commercially,
That would not need a CUP.
that would not need a CUP or an IUP.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so those are the pretty light uses that are allowed without a CUP or IUP. In the ag zoning district, we do also allow produce stands, seed sales, things like that, without a conditional use permit or an interim use permit.
Thank you.
Further questions? Comments? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. Then I've got Jean here for abatements.
Good morning, Jean.
Morning. I have 3 abatements in your packet. Any questions on any of the 3?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion on all 3.
Second.
Further discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Jean. That was pretty
Thank you.
easy, pretty quick.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Amy. And next, we've got a public hearing. Annual license fees. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Morning.
A number of items for you to consider this morning. The first being a public hearing to amend the resolution for annual license fees. From time to time, it is kind of a housekeeping item. From time to time, we'll get requests for licensure of solid waste management facilities that don't quite fall into the traditional ones that we're used to, such as a solid waste landfill, a solid waste demolition landfill, or a solid waste incinerator. So we are proposing that we would add to our licensure other solid waste management facilities, which typically probably will be some type of a land application like we've dealt with over the last couple of years. And so that's what our request is. In order to accommodate that and accomplish that, a public hearing needs to be held. Following that, the board needs to adopt this resolution.
I would then, at this point in time, open this public hearing up, and I will ask for comment, and I will ask 3 times for comment. Anyone that has a comment, if they would come to the podium, I would most appreciate that. So, very start. Anyone want to make a comment for or against this item? I will ask again, number 2. Anyone want to make a comment for or against? The third and final time, anyone want to make a comment for or against? And I will now close that portion. And I will look to the board for motion.
Our office did not receive any written comments.
Thank you.
I don't know that Steve has either, so.
Receive any.
I would look to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I'll second that. Got a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Any discussion?
I got a question, Mr. Chair. Steve, is there, let's say somebody wants to tear a barn down on their property and they bury it right there. Does that fall into any of this stuff where they've got to buy a permit or?
That's managed through the MPCA. It's a permit by rule that Chuck will work them through that system, but it's dealt with through the agency.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
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 The reason I hesitate, is this a roll call or not?
No, it's not. I just checked.
Okay, because it's on our thing here, okay.
And I will, those against? That motion then passes. And I believe we have another public hearing on another ordinance variance. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we have a request by the Department of Military Affairs to license two land treatment sites on Camp Ripley. In order to accomplish that, there are variances to the solid waste ordinance that will need to be approved by the county board so that these licensures will be in compliance with the ordinance. We do have the honor of General Cruz and his staff to be in the audience if there are any questions as we work through this process. And so we have the request for the variance and the articulation by Colonel Sukat on why they need to accomplish and conduct this activities the way they are proposing to do that. In a kind of a nutshell, the Department of Military Affairs is under directive and requirements to reduce and move towards zero waste. And our ordinance is set up so that that material goes to the landfill. They can't meet those goals and that directive by meeting the requirements of the ordinance. And so what is being proposed here, and it is something that has been done successfully at Camp Ripley for a long time, is the thin spreading and land treatment of petroleum contaminated soils on site. They have two sites. One is called the East Range site and one is the North site, both approved by the MPCA, already pre-approved for this application. There are requirements that are met and protocols that the Camp Ripley and their staff follow in order to accomplish that. And so the first reason for the public hearing is our requirement of our ordinance that we hold this hearing and we determine whether there are undue hardships, it's technologically impossible, or it is economically not feasible. And so the application was included and those items were addressed. We, as a department, have reviewed that. Our belief is there are two things that need to be met, that our solid waste management plan is followed. Our solid waste management plan moves towards the reduction, reduce, reuse of waste materials so it's not going into the landfill. So we believe that this is in compliance with that aspect of the Morrison County Solid Waste Management Plan. The second one is compliance with the ordinance and that we meet the purpose of health, safety, and welfare by protecting our land, water, and air resources. This is a process that has been pre-approved by the MPCA. It's been used successfully. There is a substantial amount of regulation that is met by the Department of Military Affairs in dealing with the MPCA and being in compliance with that. And so we believe that these aspects of our ordinance are met. And because of those things being met, we would propose that the county board consider the variance that was submitted by General Cruz, where the ordinance was reviewed, and each item in which they believe that variance from needs to be addressed. As we go through the department's report, there are a number of areas that includes. Solid waste storage, basically, our ordinance is written around storing household garbage. This is not household garbage. Those requirements don't need to be met. Just some common sense things. I think if what we're saying is the operation is being proposed is justifiable, then these variance requests are common sense things that can be put into place. Collection and transportation of solid waste. Also, we had required that solid waste either goes to our landfill or it goes to a landfill out of the state of Minnesota. The requirement of going out of the state is compliance with the Commerce Clause. Going to our landfill is essentially what our solid waste management plan revolves around, but if there are opportunities to reduce and reuse, those should really take precedent over it being taken to the landfill. It's a request to vary from our solid waste service fee. The department believes that this is an item that is acceptable because these materials never did go into the landfill that resulted in any of the remediation that's taking place out there currently. And these materials are not materials then that will be going into the facility that would result in future liabilities for the county. So we believe that this varying from the solid waste service fee is acceptable. Number 9 gets into the general provisions, which are really those details about having a mercury abatement plan, having it signed properly, gated. It's not open to the public. All of those items are listed because they're listed in our ordinance. Those, if you review that, it's just common sense that those would not apply to this type of a facility and this type of a project. Then the last item is section 18, which is the variance itself. We would propose, or the Department of Military Affairs proposes, and we would agree that this would be an ongoing variance, that they would not have to come back in every 2 years and reapply for this variance. We would see that this would be an ongoing operation until these sites are filled and completed, and new sites would have to be licensed. So the resolution that follows essentially follows through our ordinance, and it touches on all of the items that would have to be varied from to bring this operation into compliance. By approving this resolution, then we would move forward to discussing the license applications themselves for the 2 sites. So, Mr. Chairman, that is what the public hearing is about, to hear whether there's any public comment on the approval of this resolution for these variances.
And that public hearing can be opened at this point in time. And once again, I will ask 3 times for comment. If anyone has comment, I would ask them to come to the podium right over here. And I will now ask for the first time if there's anyone in the audience that has comment. And I will ask 3 times. We'll ask the second time, anyone with any comment. I will ask a 3rd time if there's anyone with any comment. I will then ask Steve, and I will ask Ms. Gruber if there was any written correspondence.
We didn't receive any in the department.
And we have no correspondence. I will then close our public hearing. I will look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. I would look for discussion.
I just would like to, Mr. Chair, that, they have a history of thin spreading correctly with no contamination to soil or water, and they'll continue to do a good job out there. It puts approving this variance puts less strain on the training of our soldiers, and it just is the right thing to do.
And Mr. Chair, we've talked about this. It's not like we're just approving this like it's the first time we've seen it. We've gone through this with them, and it seems like everything's up to date and no problem with me.
Further discussion. I will actually now look to the general in the audience, and I will say, thank you, General. Thank you and your staff for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you on board with us anytime, and as it is to always be connected with anything out of Camp Ripley. So I thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. This is a roll call vote. I will now look and call for that vote. Commissioner Blaine?
Commissioner Blaine votes aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Lemire?
Aye.
Wincher? Aye. And myself is an aye. That motion passes. Thank you all very, very kindly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And now the next action that goes along with that is the 2 license applications that were submitted by the Department of Military Affairs to operate the land treatment sites on Camp Ripley. These applications have been reviewed by Chuck, and Chuck has his report for the board that he'd like to go through with this time.
Okay.
Morning, County Board staff and visitors. I am Chuck Perrins, the Environmental Administrative Supervisor for the Public Works Department. The purpose here today is to provide the commissioners with a staff report on the applications by the Minnesota Department of Military Affairs for a license to operate a solid waste management facility and land apply petroleum contaminated soils, and make a recommendation to the board to grant or deny the license. The solid waste ordinance in the administration portion deems that the Public Works Department shall have the necessary authority to implement and carry out the provisions of the ordinance, and that is to review and consider all license applications and supporting materials for regulated solid waste activities within the county, and after consideration to recommend in writing with supporting documentation to the Morrison County Board that a license may be granted or denied. So the Department of Military Affairs and Camp Ripley Training Center has applied for 2 solid waste management facility licenses. The Public Works Department staff has evaluated the waste disposal method and activity and determined it appropriately fits the category of other solid waste disposal facility, and that's further defined as a petroleum contaminated soil land treatment sites. The PC soil land treatment sites are approved under the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, their petroleum remediation program, as the East Range and North Range, or North Land treatment sites. The MPCA approved for PC soil application under that program on CRTC on October 7th of 2015, and they issued pre-approval letters for each site. The Public Works Department staff has reviewed the applications and determined that the applications are complete. However, the necessary license fees are currently in payment process with the U.S. Property and Fiscal Office. The DMA and CRTC are currently in full compliance with the MPCA's land treatment site requirements under the PC Soils Remediation Program to land apply those soils on the Camp Ripley Reservation. And in accordance with our Section 9, which is the general provisions of solid waste management facilities, the applicant is also current on, they must be current on state and county fees and taxes. However, the DMA and CRTC are exempt from those county property taxes. However, they have an obligation to provide payment in lieu of taxes on Camp Ripley, and there have been no issues in receipt of those payments. Similarly, the DMA and CRTC shall be exempt from the provisions requiring certificate of insurance and a bond in order to comply with the provisions of the ordinance. And our inspections by the county staff of the MPCA approved sites were conducted on July 2nd of 2018 and were found to be in full compliance with the requirements of the ordinance. And we have reconciled any authorized variance or non-applicable areas of the consideration within the ordinance. Commissioners, that concludes my report. It's my recommendation that the Morrison County Board grant the license. Thank you. What are your questions?
I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, we would request that the motion be that the board approves the license for both the East Range site and the North site, direct the department to issue the licenses upon completion of our application process.
Sounds good.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Looking for discussion.
The only question I have, and help me if I'm wrong here, but when you have a spill of a small amount of fuel or something like that, I'm under the understanding that you take it out in a field and you lay it out and you kind of work it up into the environment. It's not like you dig a big hole and you put all this contaminated stuff in. Am I correct on that?
That would be a good question for how they handle that.
I think that's an accurate description, Mike, of the process. It's then spread over the top of the soil, and then it's cultivated into the soil, allow that microorganisms in the soil to break down the petroleum products.
I just want the general public to understand that we don't have a big hole dug out there that you're throwing a bunch of contaminated stuff into. So,
Yep. Very good. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Excellent. Is this
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have a couple other items under Public Works that I'd like to cover. The first being final payment certificate for Contract 275, which was the Royalton Safe Routes to School project by Kegel Underground Incorporated. That included sidewalk, grading, storm sewer, curb and gutter. We had ADA compliant pedestrian ramps and crosswalks, dynamic speed display sign, a push button pedestrian crosswalk system, and a revised signal system. Our request is that the board would approve the resolution so that we can make final payment. Our recommendation is that this project is complete.
I look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me. It's a roll call vote. Commissioner Wincher.
Aye.
Lemire.
Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Blaine.
Aye.
And myself as an aye vote.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the next request for board action is to certify final payment to Tri-City Paving for the placement of calcium chloride for the 2018 construction season that went on various county roads, and we also included in our contract Bellevue Township. This work has been conducted and is complete. It's our recommendation to approve this resolution.
Look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. This is another roll call vote. Commissioner Lemire.
Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Blaine.
Aye.
Wincher.
Aye.
And myself as an aye vote.
Then the final action item is one that we've discussed a number of times related to the acceptance of $400,000 in bonding money that was obtained in the 2017 legislative session through Representative Kresha and Senator Gazelka. We've worked with the Department of Natural Resources on this agreement for quite some time. We now have an agreement that we are presenting to the board. It's gone through legal review. Brian has reviewed this. Pretty much a typical standard agreement that if you want this money, this is what you have to enter into. It will require that the resolution approving the agreement is approved. There is also a location for the chairman of the board and the administrator to sign the agreement. And then there is a declaration page that requires the chairman to sign, which essentially establishes the project limits between Hilton and Great River Road, that the bonding funds will be used within that segment, and that we are agreeing that we will maintain and keep that as a part of the trail system until the life of that project is extended, which is, from the discussions I've had with them, 20 years.
Gentlemen, I would look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
And Mr. Chair, this is again something that we've discussed over a period of time. It's not like we're just looking at it for the first time.
This is not only something that we've discussed over and over and over. This is a trail that has been in place for years and years and years and continues to grow a little bit at a time. And like anything, when something is broke, it needs to get fixed. And there's a portion of this that we took on as a county years ago, and we need to continue on to maintain it.
Very well said.
Further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Steve, thank you.
Steve, as always, thank you very kindly.
Thanks. Mr. Chair, I'm sure we've in the past sent a letter of thanks to Commissioner Representative Kresha, Senator Gazelka for securing that $400,000.
Anticipate that we have. But if we haven't, we will. Thank you. Good morning, Brad. Good morning, Karen. Social Services is next.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. This morning, I have one report on the social service agenda, and that is the Minnesota Family Investment Program and Child Care Assistance. These are two programs that are critical to self-sufficiency for families. And so Karen is going to share some information on those programs in Morrison County.
Excellent.
Okay, and we will start with the diversionary work program. Of the last 5 years, caseload sizes, as you can see, it's gone down, not a significant amount, but it has gone down. This program is set up to get people off of assistance quickly. It's a 4-month program, and the need is set up according to what they pay for shelter, utilities, and then they get personal needs for each household member. 4-month program, if they get a job, once the program's approved, the income is not counted. So it's set up to get them off assistance and on their own. Okay, moving on to MFIP, Minnesota Family Investment Program. We have the last 5 years again. Caseloads are staying pretty much the same. With Minnesota Family Investment Program, it's a 60-month lifetime limit program. Right now, we have 25 households that are on FSS, Family Stabilization Services, which means they have something in that household. There's either mental health issues, physical issues, something that they are not able to work. So they're getting services, Family Stabilization Services, for those issues. So right now we have 25 under that. We have 6 households that are child under 1 exemption, which means they're not working right now either. We have 32 that are employed, which is good news. They're just not making enough to get off the program, but in time they should be able to. We have 10 households that are on extended. Extended means that they either have physical issues again or mental health issues where they can get over 60 months.
Karen, excuse me, I'm not sure if I tracked that or followed that correctly. You said 60-month or a lifetime?
60-month lifetime limit.
What does that mean?
It means you can have MFIP for 60 months, and if you don't meet an extension, that's it, you're done.
Oh.
Yep.
But you can get an extension for the rest of your life.
Well, you can get an extension if you're not able to work.
What does lifetime mean?
5 years in your lifetime.
Yep.
5 years in your lifetime, so you can have 1 year this year, 1 year in 2011,
Thank you.
1 year in 2014.
Thank you.
So
Okay,
5 years
very good.
in the lifetime of.
Lifetime limit, yep.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you very
So,
much.
if I may, once that 5 years limited lifetime is up, what happens then?
Well, unless you meet an extension, you don't get cash assistance if you have children. That's it. You're going to have to find employment. That's it. That's the way this program is set up. And when they apply, that's what they're told. It's a 60-month lifetime limit program. And we try to get them off before that 60 months is up.
Yeah. Very good.
They would be eligible for food support or
Right.
medical assistance, but
Yes, but
ultimately
not
the
cash.
cash assistance to pay for rent or gas or things like that would have to come from other means.
Right.
So when we talk about an extension, to go further from Commissioner Wincher, because who knows, that extension tentatively, in reality, could go on for years.
It could.
I'm going to be
But
very careful when I say forever, but
you have to
it
keep
could go
in
for
mind, they
years.
have to have a child under the age
Yeah.
of 18.
Oh, okay.
So once those children reach age 18,
It's done.
it's
Okay.
done.
So this program could go on for 18 years.
Correct.
Okay, very good. I
Or
got
up
it.
until their youngest turns 18.
Yeah,
Right.
understood. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. And then we have the payments for the last 5 years under diversionary work program for the month of April. And Minnesota Family Investment Program for the last 5 years. And then we have Minnesota Family Investment Program and Diversionary Work Program, the assistance standards. Now, these standards haven't increased since 1996, so it's been a long time. But one thing they have done, as of last year, they added, if you're not in subsidized housing, each household can get an additional $110. So instead of raising the standards, they put on a housing grant. But if you're in subsidized housing, you're not eligible for the housing grant. So that was a way for them to increase the standards. And extensions, talking about extensions, here are the extensions. If you're employed extension, one parent has to work an average of 30 hours a week. Two parents have to work an average of 55 hours a week. Normally, if you're working that many hours, you're not going to be eligible for MFIP. Your income will be over. Limited due to illness, disability extension, if a doctor says you're not able to work, but then again, we do try to get them to apply for Social Security. But sometimes, the disability isn't severe enough or long enough that they can apply or be eligible for Social Security. Hard to employ, they may have a mental illness, learning disability, unemployable. They can also get a family violence waiver, but there's certain criteria for that too. They have to have court order, they have to have order for protection, and we work with them on that. But then the months don't count if they're on family violence waiver.
So any of these extensions, the staff have to get that information
Correct.
to continue to extend them? So administratively, there's work that has to be done for individuals to be maintained on MFIP during this extension or for as long as that may happen. So even somebody who's significantly developmentally disabled, they still have to continue monitoring and managing that case.
Karen, could we go back a slide?
Sure.
And I guess I just want to point out, if for nobody else's, for my clarification, it's not as if there's anybody getting rich on any of these programs.
Absolutely not.
And I seem to recall this almost exact conversation a year ago.
Yeah.
There's nobody that wants to be on these programs.
It's difficult to make it on what they receive. They have to either be in subsidized housing.
Absolutely.
They have to get the food. Child support, if they're getting child support, we can disregard $100 per child, which helps. But if they're not getting the child support, they don't have a lot of money.
And these figures that are shown, these are monthly figures, correct?
Correct.
So you're 100% correct. There's nobody saying, oh, please get me on one of these programs because I want the money. This is if you need this. This is available.
And that's why they came up with the housing allowance or housing grant. If you're not in subsidized housing, you have a real hard time making it. So they decided to give the 110 extra.
Thank you.
So, follow up on that. So, a family of four gets $11.98 under MFIB. Am I correct?
Well, now you're looking at the cash grant
Right,
is
yep.
$621.
Yep.
And then the food, yes.
Right.
That's if
So,
there's no
but
income.
it's a total of $11.98.
Yes.
But now, where I'm going, you brought it up, income. This is income-based. So if somebody is working in that family, they obviously, again, wouldn't get that much money, correct?
Correct. If someone's working, say they're making $400 a month, we take $65 off the top of that, and then we take 1/2 of that off. So it really pays for an MFIP client to work. Because 65 and then 1/2, that's a lot taken off. The remainder goes against the grant.
Thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, on that slide, when we look at the cash portion and the food portion, so just in how that's utilized let's say for the eligible people of four, and you have a $577 food portion, is it directed that that's how much should be spent of that money should be spent on food, or is there $577 worth of groceries that are delivered to or utilized, or so how is that money administered and along those same lines, in the same essence, the cash portion of that, the $621, how do we know how that money is utilized in that household?
If we find someone comes in and they apply for emergency assistance, if we see that there's money mismanagement, we can mandate that we vendor pay their bills. So we would vendor pay their rent, we would vendor pay their utilities. If we don't find that, they are free to do as they wish with the money and with the food. The food, they use an EBT card, but they have to buy food. So they can go, the EBT card looks like a credit card. So people don't really know when they're checking out at the counter if they're using an EBT card or not. But EBT is real strict. It's for food only. So they can actually use it as they wish, but it's for food. They're supposed to pay their rent with the cash, rent and all the utilities. But there again, if they don't and we find money mismanagement, we're going to vendor pay it.
How would we find money mismanagement?
They come in and they apply for emergency assistance because they haven't paid their rent for the last 2-3 months.
Or they haven't paid their utilities, so they're
Right.
looking for us to pay, maybe catch up their electric bill or heating bill or something like that.
Yeah.
And that automatically triggers, Karen, your staff, you, whomever,
Yes.
to dig.
To vendor pay.
Okay.
Correct, yep.
Otherwise, the cash portion of that would be somewhat on an honor system that we would look at these individuals that they're utilizing that cash for life sustenance and not for other things.
Correct.
And I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But your food card, like when you get a food card, you go in, you can't buy the cigarettes and stuff won't charge up on.
No, it won't.
Correct? Yeah, they have to pay cash for that or whatever. Yep.
They won't work for cigarettes, gas,
Right.
alcohol.
Right.
It's for food only.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, we'll move on to childcare. Childcare is a program that, of course, covers childcare costs. It goes on your income. Basic sliding fee is based on the income, and we currently have 48 cases. Childcare has gone up a little bit. MFIP is Minnesota Family Investment Program cases. Those are our working clients. They get childcare. Transition year is when they're coming off of Minnesota Family Investment Program, and there may be a waiting list in certain counties. So we have transition year childcare where they don't lose the childcare. You have to keep them on transition year until you have an opening and basic sliding fee. Our county currently does not have a waiting list. So transition year, they're coming from another county. Once that year is used up, we're going to put them on basic sliding fee. Goes on their income, they have a copay. Depends how much your income is, how much you pay towards your child care.
And again, this is a program that is income-based as well, so you have to meet income levels. But as she talks, I mean, this is one of those areas that, for the working poor or those individuals who have a lower paying job but have kids, this could be a nice program that would help support their employment. And it's one of those areas that we never do fully expend our allocation. And so we've been fortunate to not have waiting lists, so when
We have.
individuals come in and apply and they're eligible, they get it. Years ago, we had
A waiting list.
quite a bit of a waiting list.
So if I may, they have to be here a year you brought up the 1 year, if you could explain.
Sorry, I probably confused you. Basic sliding fee is for people that are on no cash programs, nothing. They come in, they apply. Minnesota Family Investment Program, they're on the cash assistance, they get the child care automatically. When they come off of cash assistance, they go to transition year for a full 12 months. They move from MFIP childcare to transition year. So in counties where they have a waiting list, so say somebody moved from our county to Hennepin County, they have a waiting list. They have to keep them on transition year until they have an opening.
Who's they?
The county,
The county they move to,
yes.
or the county, or if they move here.
Yeah.
For us, these areas are not as big of a deal because we don't have a waiting list. These were really developed, so if somebody's on MFIP, they get a job, they're off MFIP, well, then they'd have to move to child care assistance, and there was never room in child care assistance to pay for that. So we didn't want them to lose their child care. So they created kind of these sets of benefits so that individuals could stay on. If there is no waiting list in child care assistance, it's not as big of a deal to have these three
Right.
categories. But for when we do have waiting lists, or counties that do have waiting lists, these are critical transition options for those individuals who get employed, but yet don't make a wage that can support them paying childcare, all of their bills and those kinds of things.
Okay. Childcare issuance. For the last 5 years, basic sliding fee, MFIP.
Got the next slide.
Yep, there we go. So it has gone down from 2014, but we're up a little bit from 16 and 17. Child care assistance, here are your income limits. Entrance level, they have to be at 47%. So when they apply, they have to be under that amount for the household size. At redetermination, which is now every 12 months, they have to be at 67% income level. And if their income goes up before the eligibility period, we can leave them on. But at the redetermination, they have to be at the 67% or we close them. Okay?
You know, I have a question just for us older people that don't have daycare anymore. I had somebody tell me the other day that they have one child that was in daycare and it was $150 a week. And now they had a baby and that's $200 a week. So when you stop and look at a family that's got 2 kids and paying $350 a week, you know, that's $1,300, $1,400 a month for daycare, and I can see where a lot of these people with a $10 an hour job, I kind of try to figure out why are all these jobs out there for people, but nobody's taking them. Well, with daycare alone, they would not make enough money to work all week to pay for daycare. And I'd like to see where the state or county could balance that out a little bit, where they can go to work and still have money left when the day is done. But it's just kind of curious. When I had kids, you know, it was $50, that type of thing. So,
yeah, daycare is expensive, and that's probably in-home daycare. If they were to look at a child care center, it's going to be even more than that.
yeah,
And then,
incredible.
you know, infant care has been very difficult to find. So, but this is, again, one of those programs that can support those lower paying jobs. And as we said, you know, they can start at lower paying and then work their way up in an organization and still get child care assistance as they work their way up. But it's hard.
Child care assistance is a good program.
Yes,
Okay, authorized activities. We pay for employment, but they have to be working 20 hours a week. That's minimum. Education, they have to have an approved plan, and we would approve the plan. Child care assistance for MFIP, as long as it's in their plan, we pay for it. Transition year, again, employment and education, and portability, which we do not have any, would be employment and education. Any questions?
Good report, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Brad.
Thank you, Karen.
Yep.
I hope you don't have to put the umbrella.
Next, I believe we entertain public health. Brad gets to change hats, but then Sarah and Emily get to join us today.
So we are here for two purposes. One of those is just to give you and share some information on what we've been doing towards zero death. But then also we're going to need the approval of a resolution to access continued grant funding for this program. So Sarah and Emily here both to give you a report and then request approval of the resolution.
Very good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So Towards Zero Death, or TZD, launched in 2003 by the Department of Public Safety. And its vision is to reduce fatalities, traffic fatalities, and serious injuries basically to zero. That is the vision and the goal of this program. TZD is on its 15th consecutive year in the state of Minnesota. Like Brad had said, we applied again for this grant, and we're on our 4th consecutive year if we receive that funding. So part of it is, if we receive that funding, hoping to get your approval that this funding is needed and our staff time is needed with all the good things that are being done in this community with this program. You can see by the graph that TZD has done great work across the state of Minnesota. Between 2003 and 2017, traffic fatalities have dropped by 45%. So other key accomplishments of the program are a statewide seatbelt use rate of 92%, passage of stronger traffic safety policies, in relation to seatbelt use, texting while driving, impaired driving, speeding while in work zones, a statewide trauma system enabling 99% of Minnesotans to reach a trauma hospital within 60 minutes. Working with public works departments to find low-cost, high-benefit strategies around intersections and lane departures, such as those rumble strips, such as that reflective paint that you can see at night, in the snow, in the rain, those types of things. So much of the success of the program comes from a culture in which traffic deaths and serious injuries are no longer accepted. And that comes from the application of what's called the 5 E's: education, enforcement, engineering, emergency and trauma services, and basically everyone. So Morrison County is part of East Central Regional Partnership that consists of 12 central counties that are listed in this report, 6 of which have the Safe Roads Coalition, which includes us. Morrison County is a part of that coalition, and Emily will talk about that a little bit later. And she will also discuss our region's top factors, how we're using this funding to decrease fatalities and serious injuries in Morrison County.
So our leading causes of death in the region are lack of seatbelt use, impaired driving, speed, and distracted driving. The next page shows some charts. The charts reflect crash data from the past 4 years. And I just want to go through, the first chart is highlighting our top factors, so alcohol, unbelted, and speed. And it does have the total in the corner. I also want to point out that it could have more than one factor per crash. So it could be alcohol related, but they also could have been unbelted. The next chart underneath that is about the types of crashes. So the first 2 are lane departure or intersection, and it's always one or the other. And then I also want to highlight our motorcycle, pedestrian, and bicyclists. Relatively low numbers, but any number over 0 is too many in our county. We have created a Safe Roads Coalition 3 years ago, and this will be our 4th year, as Sarah mentioned. Our mission is to really focus on our community partnerships, focusing on traffic safety. We have so many great partnerships, and each can reach a different population of people, so we want to make sure we're reaching everybody in our county. Having a fatal review committee that analyzes all of our fatal and serious injury crashes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then identifying and implementing strategies so we can work through our outreach and enforcement. Like Sarah discussed earlier, culture change is influenced by the 5 E's. So our coalition has representatives from the 5 E's. So we have law enforcement, Little Falls PD, our county sheriff's office, and Minnesota State Patrol. For education, public health, our schools, we have community partnerships and decision makers that sit on the board. Engineering, we have our public works department. EMS, we have both Gold Cross Ambulance and some volunteer first responders that just joined a couple months ago, which is great to have their influence. And then everyone else, we have some passionate community members as well. The Fatal Review Board, we meet quarterly, and we look at every fatal and serious crash that has happened within that quarter. We look at all the factors that led to the crashes, and then we take suggestions and bring them back to the whole Safe Roads group. And here's our suggestions of how we can prevent those crashes from happening in the future. And the last thing we do as a coalition is outreach. So we follow the enforcement calendar that law enforcement agencies use. So each month there's a different focus, and enforcement goes out and enforces, and we do the outreach. We try to get the message out. We do some education every time. The chart below is our plan for this coming grant year if we receive funding. Some of the activities are activities we have done in the past years that have been well received, and some of them are new, so we'll hopefully try some new things. A couple successes from this past year. In April, we did a social media campaign with our Little Falls School District. They came up with some messaging. They went on the radio and spoke, and they shared things on social media. And then they came and spoke to the county board. In May, we did a Buckle Up stencil campaign. So a few years back, we had the opportunity to purchase a Buckle Up stencil with a AAA grant. And our Public Works Department has had the opportunity, or has given us the opportunity, that they would donate time and the paint to go paint those stencils. Our spring was a little weird this year, so they're kind of doing other things right now. So as they have time, they'll go paint those around the county. We have about 7 businesses, including the county, that are interested in having them painted, and all of our schools in our district are also having them painted in their lots. Right now, we are in a speed enforcement until the 22nd of July. So we have sent out some messaging about slowing down, and we have a speed wagon set up. So there's movable speed signs around the county, and we're going to move them every week or so. And then they also track data so they can see kind of trends where the speeding is in the areas, and our law enforcement can use that to help slow down those places as well. In August, we are going to highlight impaired driving. So our responsible beverage server training has been such a success in this county. We plan to do some messaging around that and how it ties into impaired driving and how it benefits everyone. And then in September, our Little Falls School District is going to do a seatbelt challenge at their school, run through their Stand Up For You committee in partnership with us as a Safe Roads group. Students will stand and see what their percentages are that seatbelt use leaving the parking lot. And then they'll do it again later on in the year and see if there's changing, and do some messaging around that for their peers as well.
So as Emily, as we stated earlier, we applied again for this grant. It'll be our 4th consecutive year. We're waiting on the funding. Part of that is to bring a resolution to you for your approval, hoping to continue these efforts in our community. As you can see, we've done a lot of great things and hope to continue to do so. So, any questions or?
I would look for a motion.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
And now discussion.
The only other comment I might make is that, the Public Works Department, a couple years ago when we were thinking about whether or not we should reapply, that fatal, the fatal review committee is, I think, a requirement for the Public Works Department as well. So that fits their need in terms of what their requirements are under the state. So that's been a good partnership to make sure we're continuing that. And so.
My comment is that any time that we can have education on any topic, anywhere, that we can apply for a grant, that we can receive those funds to further that education, is never a bad idea, ever. When we start talking about seatbelts in the state of Minnesota, I can go on record saying that I happen to know that they are used. I happen to know that the percentage, although there might be a bad day, the percentage of seatbelt use is huge compared to what it was 10 or 15 years ago. And I know that because funding for one of the committees that I sit on, which is an EMS committee, is funded from seatbelt fines. That funding has gone right into the toilet because people are wearing seatbelts. That can only be done through education. And we know that it's done through education. So, again, anytime that we can apply for a grant, in my estimation, that is going to educate our public in anything, and you listed all kinds of things today, I think that it is nothing but a win-win, and it's a win-win for everyone.
And it's such a community partnership, which I think is great, and Emily does such a great job of coordinating that community partnership and getting everyone involved, whether it's youth, law enforcement. So it's just so great to see the success and everyone coming together.
Exactly. I agree. Further.
I know that Sourcewell, formerly NJPA, gave $100,000 to Brainerd Zero Death to buy equipment and stuff that is available to all 5 counties. So I hope you take advantage of that equipment. It's for drunken driving. It's a machine with seat belts, knowing the impact and stuff, and they'll be receiving that. But those programs are designed that we're all able to use those. So.
Commissioner Blaine, you've got that look again.
Yep, I do. I just, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank these 2 young ladies for their report to us this morning and for the work they've done and for the ongoing work they will do on this issue, which is providing that safety as a big part of what we do here in Morrison County. So I applaud you for your work. Thank you for being here this morning.
2 young ladies and 1 old man.
Yes, that
Just 2 young ladies.
Works, yeah. Big smiles, I like that.
no,
Just 2 young ladies.
no offense there, Brad.
Further discussion,
They get all the
gentlemen.
work on this report, so they get all the credit.
Further discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you all very, very kindly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I just have one other item under the public health report, and that is to approve a 1-day temporary on-sale liquor license for the Randall Cushing Area Lions Club for July 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
That's all I have this morning. Thank you, Mr.
Brad,
Chair.
thank you very kindly. Next, we've got the county auditor, Deb. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
How are you this morning?
I'm good,
Good.
thank you.
Good.
I am asking you to approve a joint powers agreement with Secretary of State's office that allows us to assist them with recounts during the primary and general elections this year. They ask for this approval every 2 years when we have elections for governor's races or presidential races or Senate elections. So
It's a joint powers agreement.
joint powers agreement. Brian, our attorney, has reviewed this. It's a boilerplate agreement with the state, so.
I would look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Discussion? I have one question. What happens if we don't follow through with this?
Then somebody else would assist with the recount. Generally, the recounts are like a senatorial race or governor's race, and so if we don't assist, then it would go to somebody like Stearns County, who would have more manpower. And the state does reimburse anybody who assists like 4 cents or 5 cents per ballot that's recounted. It's really just to assist to get the recounts done quicker, so that we can get on with the elections and get everything done.
And we're recounting our county ballots,
Generally,
correct?
it is our county. Occasionally, we will assist with recounting others.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
And then we have warrants also.
And what do you think about those warrants, gentlemen?
I'll make a motion to approve the warrants as presented.
Second.
This is a roll call vote. Commissioner Wincher?
Aye.
Lemire?
Aye.
Wilson?
Aye.
Blaine?
Aye.
And myself as an aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
That motion passes. And we've got, it is time for the administrator's report. Finally. We'll graph
I
that.
don't have action items for you today, but this is the first level, looking east. As you can see, there's some millwork even in. Painting done. Land services counter, there's a little closer view of that millwork. There is some detail that's going in of that yet. The northeast side where the passport counter is in the recorder's office. You can see the grid on the ceiling is in, and the lights are in. Oh.
I went through that yesterday, and that really has opened things up a lot. It's going to be a nice layout.
Yes, and this is one of the, just a sample of the tiling and one of the restrooms on that first floor. So things are coming along. I am hoping to schedule a meeting with you folks for a building committee to talk a little bit about furniture and some different things happening with the roof. We're finding some interesting things, of course, that are popping up with drainage and whatnot. And so that's component is taking a bit longer than we had hoped. But just want to talk through it so you guys are aware of all those details and what's happening. And so I am hoping that can happen next week. Do you guys have a lot going on Wednesday next week? I just tentatively asking that because we have a construction meeting. It looks like you have a number of things with the Emergency Services Board for at least Commissioner Jelinski, but
I'm open on Wednesday, the 18th.
just for curiosity's sake, to see what you have going on, because we have a normal construction meeting at 1 o'clock every other Wednesday. And so I thought if we could piggyback on that, many of the folks that I'd like to have there will be there already. So that's what I'm asking.
What time of the day would it be?
Likely either late morning or afternoon.
You going to send that out?
I will, yes. I'll verify all of that with whom I need, but I just wanted to kind of get a gauge on your schedule, if that's all right.
That'll work, great. That'll work.
Okay, all right. I will let you know for sure. That's good to know that that's there and available. But otherwise, plugging away at that and continues to be time-consuming, but fun and interesting to see. So that's going well. Is there anything else for me? I was off for some time, so I know that you may have tried to catch me. I kept up on emails and everything, so I think I didn't miss much, but could be. I know Commissioner Winter had mentioned I'm connecting with somebody regarding the, and I just lost the name of it now. I'm blanking out on the legacy, on the Belle Prairie Master Plan, and talking with some folks on that and whatnot. And so there's a few different topics that'll come up that we'll talk more about as we move through the summer. And then this afternoon we have a strategic planning session. I'm looking forward to that, both this week and next week. We'll be heading over there and working on kind of setting the stage for the future and making sure that your vision as a board is carried through when it comes to how everyday leadership is occurring and staff communication and public communication and all of that. So I'm anxious for that. Thank you for your participation in advance.
So we're 11 o'clock, we're supposed to be over
Yep.
Bowles.
In Upsala?
Yep. But a bolus, not Upsala.
Oh, Bolus?
Yep.
Bolus.
You can go to Upsala if you too.
You can go to Upsala if you'd like, but we will not be there.
Hey, Bolus. Is
We
that
did
the
have-
same building? Is that where we were last time we had one?
Yeah, it was a number of years ago, but yeah.
Yeah?
We did have one other item, I believe, Ms. Gruber, if you want to address the MOU.
Oh,
dealing
thank you,
with the
yes.
Camp Ripley Veterans State Trail.
What do they
Yes,
call that
thank you for the
building?
reminder.
What do they call the building? in
Bowles
Bowles?
Community
In the board
Center.
packet?
West of Royalton?
It's the Bolus
Oh,
Community
thank you.
Center.
Don't
Forgot
blink
about
your
that.
eyes, you'll miss it.
Straight south.
We do have an MOU. Thank you,
Gentlemen.
Commissioner Jelinski. I forgot about that. I do have an
Sorry.
action item. The Camp Ripley Veteran State Trail has a resolution for supporting the trail alignment, if that's the right word to be, on the west side of Camp Ripley. And so that's something that they're looking for various entities who would be impacted or have interest in it to support. It's something that has been talked about for a while now and been in the plan and then maybe out of the plan, then in the plan again is how it was presented to me. But Commissioner Jelinski probably can offer a better explanation.
As we know, the Camp Ripley Veterans State Trail continues to grow, and it grows right through Morrison County. And once that trail is completed, and we might all live long enough to see that, I don't know, it will be the longest continuous trail, I believe, in the world, to tell you the truth. And right now, this MOU speaks about it actually going alongside Camp Ripley, probably on Camp Ripley property. And all it really is our friends at Camp Ripley, state of Minnesota, and everybody involved thought that it would be a whole lot cleaner if there was a memorandum of understanding or an MOU simply supporting the layout. That's all it is. It's not a cost. Nobody's paying. This is all a state trail. But because Morrison County has supported our trails in the past, we certainly, I believe, would support it furthering in hope of one day seeing it be connected to I think it's the Paul Bunyan Trail in Crow Wing County. At the Crow Wing County Park, I believe is where it would eventually end up to be.
Now,
Anyway, that's that.
Is this the one that's a bicycle trail? And the other side was talking about four-wheeler trail, correct?
Yep.
So they could be put, I think they're gonna have a horse trail. And
Well, but I don't know how much of this is multi-purpose.
Okay.
I can't
Yep,
tell you
okay,
that,
okay.
but it's that trail. So,
And this would be located, you said, on the west side of Camp Ripley?
yes, as it is right this second, our friends at Camp Ripley my understanding is that they're going to allow usage on what is Camp Ripley property right now.
Okay, that answers my question.
To use
Thank you.
that. So I would guess I would look for a motion simply dealing with the MOU, which it spells out in here that we're supporting the trail being continued, if you will.
Alignment on the west side of Camp Ripley as being an option.
Very good.
And I would assume that would come with authorization for Commissioner Jelinski to sign that on behalf of the board.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
Discussion. Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else that I might be forgetting that you could nicely remind me of? I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, do we want to do calendars?
Yep.
And if we do, Commissioner Blaine, do you want to start things off?
We talking about from the 11th through the 28th?
16th, or
The 11th through the 28th. 15th through the 28th.
So
15th.
we have a planning meeting on the 17th and a strategic planning meeting that afternoon. That's a week from today. On the 23rd, I've got the Camp Ripley tour, planning and zoning that evening. Our board meeting on the 24th. I have Rural Development Finance Authority meeting at 4 o'clock on the 24th. Region 5 on the 26th, and also Judge Wetzel's appointment on Friday the 27th. I thought I was maybe missing something here later this week. I don't see that.
Okay,
I think that's it.
very good. Commissioner Wilson?
On the 17th, I got community development at 12:15. We'll possibly have that construction meeting on the 18th. Got airport commission at noon on the 19th. Planning commission board meeting, Mississippi Headwaters on the 27th. Is that where we quit, 27th?
Mm-hmm.
That's at 10 a.m.
10 a.m., yep.
Commissioner Lemire?
you got me.
Commissioner Wincher?
All right. Well, and you bring up the strategic planning on the 17th.
Yep.
Okay. I have Great River Regional Library at 5 o'clock on the 17th. And then possibly that open construction meeting on the 18th. And that'll probably be sometime that day. And then board on the 24th. Soil and water on the 26th. At 9. And that's it.
You have TCC on the 19th?
Did you put that, oh, that's right, you're not, yes, I do, I'm sorry, I put that down, yeah, forgot that. Thank you for bringing that up.
And my turn starting on. There's a fair work night if anybody's interested in coming out to the fair on the 17th at 6:30. On the 18th at 5 o'clock, I've got a Hands of Hope meeting at the Pine Country Bank. On the 19th at 10 o'clock in the morning, I've got an Armor Owners and Operators meeting in Douglas County in Alexandria. Also that day at 10:30, there's a Dairy Field Day. I believe that's in Commissioner Blaine's area. I can't remember. Can you remember, Randy?
Actually, I'm in that business.
Which, yeah, I can't remember the name off the top of my
It's in
head.
Swanville District or Swanville.
But I can't remember the people.
Yeah.
Let me know when you find out.
Yeah. And on the 20th, on the 23rd, Tabitha, I believe you probably got me scheduled for Armor at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'll probably be missing that because we've got the Camp Ripley tour at noon. I'll probably be missing Stand Up For You at 2.
Do you want me to not mention
I
them?
don't think there's a reason to mention them. And then the Planning Commission, you've got that already. There's also another fair work night, if anyone's interested, on the 24th at 6:30. Fairgrounds work night. On the 25th at 10 o'clock and at 1 o'clock, I've got Central Minnesota Emergency Services Board in St. Cloud. On the 26th, there's a statewide Emergency Communications Board meeting at Arden Hills. That's it.
On the 16th.
You have, I just put it in. That's an advisory board meeting, and I don't know if I'm going to it. But that's, go ahead and put that down, because that's at 6:30 in the evening in Stearns County at the Service Center. And that's all I have. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? This meeting is adjourned. It's 10:11.